The Panthers have had the worst tight end production in the league since 2020. Will that come to an end this draft? We'll discuss three prospects that could make sense for the Panthers right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council. And today, let's talk about tight ends. We have an awesome network of college hosts here on Locked On Podcast Network. And I want to tap into that today and throughout the next couple of weeks leading up to the draft by having shows called Positions of Need, where we'll focus in on one position and look at three prospects that could make sense for the Panthers and guys that the Panthers have already talked to or reportedly are set to visit with. The three we're going to talk about today are Kenyon Sadiq from Oregon, Dae'Quan Wright from Ole Miss, and Oscar Delp from Georgia. To help is Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On Oregon. We have Stephen Willis of Locked On Ole Miss and Clint Shamblin of Locked On Bulldogs covering the Georgia Bulldogs. Got these three guys coming on to break down Kenyon, Dae'Quan, and Oscar, and they did a great job of doing it. So let's start off with the guy that many of you, and myself included, I think, want to see the Panthers take 19th overall. That is Kenyon Sadiq. And here is our guy from Locked On Ducks, Spencer McLaughlin. All right, let's start off here with the guy that all of you keep asking me about, whether the Panthers should take him 19th overall. That's Kenyon Sadiq from the Oregon Ducks, who, well, let me start over. Yeah, all right, let's start here with the, all right, let's start here by discussing the guy that all of y'all keep asking me about, the Panthers potentially taking at 19th overall. That's Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end out of Oregon. Someone who has covered Kenyon Sadiq, talks about him on pretty much a daily basis, is Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On Ducks, also the host of Locked On College Football. Check him out on YouTube and, of course, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Spencer, what's going on, man?
Draft season. I am more than a little intrigued to see where all these Oregon players fall. You know, it's a more common occurrence than it used to be for Oregon players to be taken highly in the draft. That used to be just, few and far between. I mean, I remember when Deion Jordan went number 3 overall. That was the highest Oregon draft pick I'd seen in my entire life, quite literally, because I'm too young to have been around for the Joey Harrington days. So there is still a part of me that geeks out on this stuff and appreciates it, and appreciate you having me on, Julian.
Damn. Just feel old now that you dropped that you weren't even around for Joey Harrington. Like, I'm only 33. Yeah. I have a Joey Harrington, like, Detroit Lions jersey back home. I was me and my buddy Kyle were big, like, Oregon, like, fans back when they had all the cool jerseys. When that was cool. And that still is. But, before Oregon really blew up to what they are today. Now, too many people are on Oregon, so we're kind of like, we're off that. But, damn. Okay, so
you can come back on the train anytime. Hey, look, man. It's great being miserable. It's great getting excited every year and then having your heart just taken straight out of your chest. It's fantastic.
I'm still on the train, but not as, like, we were college football hipsters growing up. We were like, yeah, man, we're on that West Coast stuff before everybody else was. Missed the old Pac-12, and I got my North Carolina shirt on, so that's my real allegiance here. Yeah. But we're talking Kenyon Sadiq. I was looking at the consensus draft board, which takes, like, all these mock drafts and then kind of averages out where guys are going to fall. They have Sadiq at 16. 45% of those mock drafts that do the first round have him going to the Panthers at 19th overall, which I think would be awesome. And he would also be the first Duck to be drafted in the first round by the Panthers since Jonathan Stewart, who turned out to be a damn good player. Now, the main reason I think it would be awesome is because the Panthers' tight end production has been woeful since 2020, and that's the year after Greg Olsen decided, I'm going to leave and go to Seattle before retiring. So when looking at Sadiq as a receiver, just where is he the most dangerous right now?
Wherever you want him to be. This is a guy that will line up at any spot on the field, and he can do whatever is asked. He truly is. You mentioned that I've talked about him a lot. I have, and the void that he leaves behind. And I think Oregon has done a good job of backfilling the talent in that room. None of the guys, though, are like Kenyon Sadiq, because there's never been an Oregon tight end really like Kenyon Sadiq. The most physically freakish tight end before Sadiq that had played in my lifetime and I'm not saying necessarily the best, I'm just saying the most physically freakish. I'm sure this is a name you'll remember. Colt Lyerla was the name. And there was a video that went viral back in the day of Colt Lyerla standing in a pool, hip high, and he jumped out of the pool. And it looks, oh, yeah, that's impressive. Go try and jump out of a pool waist deep and let me know how far you get. It won't be as far up the wall as you think. So even he was different than Sadiq. He was this big, hulking guy that was athletic but could just serve as a road paver. And Sadiq can be that type of guy, but he's slimmer than Lyerla was, and he's so much more nimble. I mean, you can literally line him up anywhere on the field. He lined up at all of the following places in his Oregon career. Out wide at wide receiver, in the slot at wide receiver, as an end-line tight end, as an H-back, as a Wildcat quarterback, and I believe there were a couple snaps, I'd have to think back to the specific games, where he lined up as a running back as well. And this is not a guy who's jack of all trades but master of none. He is jack of all trades and master of whatever you are asking him to do. The athleticism mixed with the size and the blocking ability is special and not like anything that Oregon has ever produced before. And I love the Jonathan Stewart callback, by the way, because that was also one of the first guys that I remember watching as a kid. And then he went to the NFL. And again, there just weren't that many Oregon players. There was Haloti Ngata was another big one. Ed Dixon was an early name that I recall. Patrick Chung with the Patriots. But Stewart was the first guy from Oregon, from my childhood, that I ever remember thinking about drafting in fantasy football because he was indeed that productive. And he's one of the best to ever do it at Oregon. So I love that callback.
Yeah, Jay Stu is a dog, a guy I talk to a lot in the press box. We had him on the show here not too long ago leading into
Do
that
you really?
game. Yeah, so
that's
dude.
awesome.
Good
That's
dude.
awesome.
One of the dignitaries of the city of Charlotte at this point in time. But yeah, man, he's awesome. So you talk about he can do anything as far as you line him up out wide, you line him out H back, in line, all of that. That's great. But can he block? Is that something he's able to do?
Yeah, it's not just something he's able to do. He is exceptional. You can find a clip of him putting Abdul Carter on his backside from the Big Ten championship game in 2024. This is not a guy. If you have ever heard, and I don't think it's been suggested wildly, I think there have been a couple of instances, and it's mostly, I think, just stereotypical because he's so athletic and he lines up at wide receiver. The consensus thought in your head is, well, he's probably not that great of a blocker. No, Kenyon Sadiq is an all-around tight end. He can pass block, he can run block, he can pull around on counter plays. He's exceptional. He was Oregon's best blocking tight end this past year, and they are definitely going to miss that with him going into the NFL draft. And that's I think been the biggest area of development that he underwent at Oregon, because he was actually, I don't know if he was primarily, it was so long ago, he was a 2023 recruit, and one of the early, kind of big recruiting wins that I covered back in the early days of Locked On Ducks. That might have been back in the headset days before I switched over to the Yeti mic that I have. But yeah, that was a big recruiting win, and you didn't really know what you had entirely for the number one player coming out of the state of Idaho. It's not a football mecca. You just don't have that many people. Yeah, it's not a Texas, California, Florida, Arizona, Utah. No, it's Boise. And it became clear very quickly that, this guy's potential is immense. And, he popped his junior year. The only reasons he didn't the other 2 years, he was sitting behind a second-round pick at tight end in Terrence Ferguson, who's now with the Rams. Like this, I actually had a question on my show not long ago about whether Oregon will be tight end U by 2029. And at the rate they're going, I think it's kind of a coin flip, because Sadiq will be taken in the first round. Next year, Jamari Johnson's probably going in the first round, second at the latest. And then five-star Kendra Harrison is starting his career this year, and he's 6'7", 250 with athleticism. So it's an exciting time for that group. But to go back to your question, yes, Kenyon Sadiq is not just a capable blocker, he has shown himself to be a plus blocker in a number of different ways. You get him pulling around on a counter play, he's going to put a linebacker or an end on his butt.
Yeah, and as a Tar Heel, Kendra Harrison leaving the state of North Carolina, go all the way to Eugene. It certainly hurts for that to happen. But hey,
I can't believe that Bill Belichick couldn't win that recruiting battle with Dan Lanning. Gosh almighty, Julian.
Yeah, crazy.
How did Dan Lanning pull it off?
God, let's not even mention the name Bill Belichick on the show. Last one here for you. There's guys I look at, 'cause when I watch college, I don't ever view it from the lens of, oh, this guy would be great on Sundays. I could not care less. I'm watching because I love college football. But there are certain guys I look at come draft time. I'm like, all right, let's now view them from the lens of like, okay, what would they do on Sundays? And there are dudes who are like, there's just no way this guy's not going to be a stud. Panay Sewell, a former Duck, was one of those guys. Like, I was saying on the show a couple years ago, draft Panay Sewell, 8th overall, or we riot. Now the Lions got him right ahead of Carolina, so no riot was needed outside the stadium. But he's turned out to be a pretty damn good player. I'm looking at Sadiq. I understand that the jump from the NFL to tight end at that position can be difficult, but we've seen recently Brock Bowers, stud in college, stud immediately. Colson Loveland, stud at Michigan, stud immediately. Tyler Warren, stud immediately. I feel like Sadiq's got to be next in line. So what is it? That's the biggest thing that's going to determine his ceiling and whether he hits it at the NFL level.
I think it's putting him into the right situations to succeed and not thinking that he's just a big body tight end. But if you want to maximize his potential, and Oregon fans have mixed reviews on whether his talent was maximized during his career at Oregon. I mean, there were games this past year, they had injuries to the wide receiver room, and who was their leading receiver regularly as a result? It was Kenyon Sadiq. I mean, if you're a Carolina fan thinking about, is Kenyon Sadiq a guy we want to go get? Go watch the second touchdown that he hauls in. I think it's in the third quarter against USC. Just watch that play. That's Kenyon Sadiq in a nutshell. This is a guy that you dial up 4 verts to because he can beat a corner by jumping over the top of him. He can be a safety or a linebacker by running by him. He's got elite speed, phenomenal short area quickness. He just does everything. He can be a red zone target. He can be a downfield target. You could throw screen passes to him. There's nothing on the football field he cannot do. Literally nothing. And so I think the question is, do you put him in situations where he is able to maximize his abilities, where maybe that only happens sometimes at Oregon, or do you use the tight end in a more conservative fashion and just run him on a bunch of flats and drag routes, in which case he'll do that perfectly fine. But he can do a lot more than that. And that's what makes him so dangerous. So no, I don't think there's a lot of miss potential with him as a prospect. I just look at his situation and go, what's he walking into? How is he going to step into an NFL team and play a role, and how big is that role? That probably depends on personnel, both at quarterback and with the offensive coordinator. But this is an offensive coordinator's best friend. That's really what he is. There's nothing that you could ask him to do that he won't be able to do. And he's a really good guy too.
And, well, that's always important, obviously. It'll be interesting, too, because Carolina is now switching over from Dave Canales, the head coach, who's been the play caller, to Brad Idzik, who's been the OC, is now allowed to actually be the OC and call the plays. So we have no idea what Brad's going to do as far as utilizing a tight end. But I think you can figure it out with someone like Kenyon Sadiq, and I can just imagine Panther fans right now foaming at the mouth, wanting this dude to be the pick at 19 after listening to you, Spencer. Check him out again on Locked On Ducks, covering the Oregon Ducks, and also on Locked On College Football. Check him out over on X, Twitter, whatever, at S. McLaughlin, CFB. Spencer, appreciate your time as always, my friend.
Yeah, good to talk to you, Julian.
Absolutely. We'll take a quick pause. We'll come back and we'll discuss another prospect who's not Kenyon Sadiq, but he comes from an SEC program in Dae'Quan Wright from Ole Miss. Talk to Stephen Willis of Locked On Ole Miss here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood Prediction Markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood Prediction Markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator, play by play. You decide, trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Taking a look at some positions of needs for the Panthers heading into the draft next month in Pittsburgh. And today, let's focus in on the tight ends. To help us discuss one of the prospects Carolina is going to be meeting with here momentarily is Stephen Willis of Locked On Ole Miss. Stephen, how you doing, man?
I'm doing quite well. I've had Dae'Quan on my show 3 times. I'm excited to talk about him.
Awesome. Well, take me into that. Since you've talked to Dae'Quan Wright a couple times on your show, what's been the measure that you've gotten from the young man when you guys have sat down and had conversations?
He's pretty well thought out. Like whenever he's getting to the end, whenever Ole Miss was going through the crap that they went through last November and everything, I had him on the show right in the beginning of all of that. And he was sitting here saying, hey, is me and the other guys on the team, we've told the younger guys, no days off for the next month. The goal is the playoffs. Everything's about the playoffs. Everything else is just noise. The guy has his head on right, and he just impressed the heck out of me that day.
Yeah, that was interesting time for Ole Miss. I did actually go talk to Princely Umami about the situation. We know that his brother has followed Lane, but he took a long pause when I asked, what would you do in this situation? So it's interesting to hear Dae'Quan took upon himself to be a leader, knowing his last season in college anyway. So obviously he was trying to chase that national championship once Pete Golding took over. But looking at him as a player, the Panthers have had the worst tight end production from a receiving standpoint since 2020, really since Greg Olsen left to go to Seattle before retiring. What does Dae'Quan provide as a pass catcher to an offense?
Run after the catch. That's the first thing that you will notice with Dae'Quan Wright is he'll catch an RPO 7 to 10 yards downfield and somehow make a couple of linebackers miss, and he's in the open field, and it's like, whoa, they're not gaining on him as quickly as they should. And that's the impressive part about Dae'Quan. And when you add in the hands that he has, I don't think I saw him drop a pass all season long. That is the avenue that you want to live in. Now, the flip side of that is I don't know exactly what he'd be like with his hand down and doing the straight tight end type stuff. But the pass catching, the run after the catch, the hands, that is all there.
So that's a guy you think more split out wide, kind of in that slot as a tight end makes more sense for him at the next level, more so.
Yes, like that, or the H-back thing that happens. Just I don't know about inline with his hand in the dirt. I know that Ole Miss split him out quite a bit. Now they always split out their tight ends because they play matchups and things like that. But that's the tight end position at Ole Miss. I know whenever he goes to the next level, it's going to be different. So he's going to have to get his hand dirty, essentially. But in my opinion, he's a little bit bigger version of what Evan Ingram was when he came out of Ole Miss.
Okay.
Because he was a true pass catcher, a weapon on the outside, and everybody had questions when he got to the NFL about his hand going down in the dirt and playing inline tight end.
Yeah, and that's a question I have for you next as far as a blocker, because we always focus a lot of times on what a tight end can be in the pass game. Well, as we know, at most levels, if you can't block, well, that's a receiver, that's a running back, pass protection, you're not going to get the opportunity to get the ball in your hands. How is he as a blocker?
He is good. He's got the difference between him and Evan Ingram is he's 250 pounds. He's a bigger player. So he just wasn't asked to do it. He can do it. And he just wasn't asked to do it. And he's somebody that if you tell him to do it, it breaks it down. He's going to get better. He's going to be completely all in, and he'll be the guy that you expect him to be. But I wouldn't expect a finished product in May if a draft pick is made.
Yeah, and looking at him, once he comes to the next level, you talk about he's still some clay that's got to be molded there. Do you foresee him potentially being kind of an every down tight end, even if maybe the inline stuff might be a question, or is he going to be more of just a specialized kind of guy that's just going to be more of a receiver than that true, hey, he can play first, second down and be able to block for him as well?
I think he will be an every down tight end. The tight ends that, heck, the Carolina Panthers and Ole Miss, they're known for their marriage together with Wesley Walls and Chris Mangum. I think they can do that. And if the patience is there, it goes back to the Panthers went on. Like, I know they drafted Bryce Young, but they had Matt Corral. So Matt Corral's a former Ole Miss guy that goes to Carolina.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work out. But before that draft, whenever I looked, and that was
2022.
Yeah, that was the Kenny Two Gloves draft in Pittsburgh and all of that. And I was like, anybody that gets drafted in the first round is going to end up playing in the UFL. If you force them to play, they're going to end up playing in the UFL, because every one of those quarterbacks, in my opinion, were on the Steve McNair track, to where you sit them down for 3 years and you just teach them how to play quarterback. If you have to play them, they're not going to be as good. So the patience is going to be key. So with Matt Corral, he obviously didn't get that patience. And by the way, he's starting with the Birmingham Stallions right now. But you need to do a little bit of that same patience if you draft Dae'Quan Wright, because of that unmolded clay that you're going to be getting.
Yeah.
Now it's there.
And I agree with you, because I mean, I watched plenty of Ole Miss games, and like what Lane was doing in that offense, and even once he left, what they were still able to do. Like, Wright's a hell of a player, and constantly have those back at Ole Miss during that offense. I'm sure that'll be the case now with John David Baker as the OC. And I think when he comes to Carolina, the fact that they've drafted Mitchell Evans and JT Sanders the last 2 years, have Tommy Trimble, he would be allowed the opportunity to really grow and develop in this offense. And you mentioned, like, Chris Mangum, Ole Miss Rebel, Wesley Walls, Ole Miss Rebel, Marquise Haynes was here. They drafted Princely last year. Jonathan Mingo was here briefly. Matt Corral. A lot of Rebs come to Carolina. Well, what's the is that the first? I mean, I haven't thought about that, Stephen.
Yeah, for whatever reason, like, I went to high school with Chris
Michael
Mangum.
Orr, too.
Yeah. I was on a high school football team with Chris Mangum, so I followed the Panthers from afar just because of him, essentially. But it always seems like there's an Ole Miss player or two sitting on that roster, and I'm just going to assume that it's because we put out good product. But I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Yeah, and I do think Panther fans are going to be hoping for a little bit more than the recent Ole Miss players that they've taken. Not Princely, there's still time for him, but Corral did not work out. Mingo, certainly, that was a tough one for them as well. Last one for you, as far as Dae'Quan Wright goes, you've kind of mentioned this already, but what do you think is the biggest thing that will determine his ceiling at the next level in the NFL?
Consistency. He needs to be able to pick up everything to where he can stay on the field. You don't want to be a specialty player to where it's a third down tight end that comes in that everybody knows that, they're going to be doing something for him. He needs to be somebody that can play inside the game, but also the Panthers can use the gifts that he obviously has. He has the chance to be special at the tight end position, but you have to mold him in that direction immediately. Don't view him as a finished product. And sometimes in the NFL, we can fall into that trap.
I'm excited to see what's going to happen there. Dae'Quan Wright reportedly going to speak with the Panthers here, likely as a 30 visit. He is a tight end from Ole Miss. He is Stephen Willis, though, the host of Locked On Ole Miss. Check him out over on YouTube, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Also, check him out over on Twitter at the Stephen Willis and at Locked On OM, obviously for Ole Miss. Stephen, appreciate your time as always, my friend.
Hey, appreciate it, bud, and good luck on the draft.
Absolutely. Take a quick pause. We'll come back and we'll stay in the SEC. We're talking about Oscar Delp. Is he the next great tight end out of the University of Georgia? That coming up here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Last but certainly not least, let's discuss Oscar Delp, man, from Georgia. Here to help us out now is one of the hosts of Locked On Bulldogs, covering the Georgia Bulldogs, Clint Shamblin. What's going on, Clint?
Not a whole heck of a lot. Glad to be here. Love every team that does have interest in the Dogs, because it means the GM is smart and likes to keep doing his job. And so that's very good. I hope the Panthers actually find a way to get Georgia players on their team.
Well, they certainly are interested in Oscar Delp as he's going to take a top 30 visit to Charlotte, as Panthers are, as I've been told, interested in drafting a tight end. I'm very interested to see whether he is truly a fit for the Panthers. So when looking at Oscar, for Carolina, the tight end production has really not been good over the last 6 seasons. They are dead last since 2020 in tight end production in the league. They have invested in guys like JT Sanders and Mitchell Evans over the last 2 seasons and have not quite gotten what they were hoping for out of guys, in particular JT, so far. So as a pass catcher, what does Oscar provide at this level, you believe?
It's really phenomenal. If you look at a lot of his tape, you saw it on the comp or the pro day that he did, and you saw explosivity all over the place. Brock Bowers is the most polished tight end to ever come out of college football. Oscar Delp is explosive. He's in the same vein. He's not in the same tier, but he's in the same vein. Explosive, upfield threat, and a catch radius that is quite large. His maneuverability once the ball is in the air and the tracking of the ball, I think, is really exceptional. Brock Bowers is very good at running routes, crisp, clean, getting open. I think Oscar Delp, if there's one thing he has over him, him being Brock Bowers, it's the maneuverability once the ball's in the air. I think body control, he has that great depth of skill on that. High pointing a ball, getting open, even when he's covered. A number of times last year where outside routes were one of his favorite because inside pressure, inside leverage from a DB, he was able to get that outside and have just enough space to move and get his body in position for catches like that. And then running in route, getting hit on the run and continuing. You saw the pro day. He's insanely fast. And it's not just inline speed. He played with the fracture in his lower extremity the entire year. With that, he has mobility that he didn't get to show on tape that he's now showing in pro day because he has that. So as a pass catcher, sky's the limit for him, truly and honestly. I was just on last week, Locked On Bulldog, saying within 2 years, he's going to be a top 5 tight end in the league. And that's partly because the tight ends in the league, the threshold to get there is not that much. Actually, you just need a team that knows how to use a tight end. Once they do, and once they exploit it, I really do think he's going to be in the top 5 of receptions and yards for tight end. And then that touchdowns are a case in point of the productivity of the offense of NFL. But he has every single tool at his disposal to be a top 5 pass catcher in the league.
Wow, that is strong statement that you made there, Clint. And even to say before that, there's something he does better than Brock Bowers in itself was like, oh, okay. So I like the sound of that. Yeah, that's one of the things you see a lot of these guys dealing with stuff. And Georgia is one of those programs where a guy is just not going to shut it down. We saw Brock Bowers do that a couple years ago when he had the tightrope surgery. He got back as soon as he could, and he was a stud, and he's come in the league. He's been outstanding. We've also seen a guy like Darnell Washington. Georgia's becoming kind of that tight end of late. I'm sure Lawson Lucky next year in the draft would be somebody people are talking a lot about. And I'm excited to see him this fall get an opportunity to kind of be the guy in a way that Oscar got to be that, or at least was projected to be that this past fall. Pass catching's great, but blocking is going to be the first thing he's asked to do. How good of a blocker is he?
This is going to be, you named 2, again, all-time greats, Big O, Darnell Washington, and Brock Bowers, as well as Lawson Lucky. And just look out, by the way, if you think I'm excited about Oscar Delp, come back next year talking about Lawson Lucky, because I think he's going to be on the same at par with Oscar Delp. But I say this with all sincerity. He was the best perimeter blocking tight end that Georgia has ever had. And it's not even close. Big O, Darnell Washington, in line. It's like he's another tackle. I mean, you put him on the end of the line and it's freakish. Oscar Delp getting a reach block up to the second level and going on to the DB and linebacker. I have never watched film on a tight end at Georgia that was as good as Oscar Delp is. It's where he excelled, truth be told. And I don't know if Panther fans are excited for this, but I certainly am as a football fan. I like football players and guys that can stay on the field in any situation, in any down with any distance. That's what Oscar Delp brings, because when he is able to go ahead and use his athleticism to get on the edge, his technique and blocking and his tenacity, he has that absolute grit to drive guys down the field. You don't play in Kirby Smart's system unless you love blocking downfield. And Oscar Delp, I can't tell you the number of times where Daniel and I, my co-host, would get on the pod and bring up the play of the game And it wasn't the 50-yard catch. It wasn't the 12-yard run. It was Oscar Delp sealing a block to spring Branch, who had the screens on the outside. And Branch is going to be a top wide receiver.
Was that the Tennessee game back in week 3?
Tennessee. Oh my gosh, Julian.
That's the exact play I'm thinking about. That was him, right? Yeah.
That was all him. He made that play. It was Branch being faster than everybody on the field. But without Oscar Delp out there, that play doesn't happen. No touchdown happens. Georgia loses. Early season loss. And I don't know if we have the season we have. Oscar Delp is that guy that makes a whole offense go. I mean, it's George Kittle-esque. Again, Brock Bowers is the best receiving, but George Kittle has the ability to block and pass catch. And that's what Oscar Delp brings. He's a guy that doesn't get off the field on any down.
Yeah, and that's the thing I love when guys are able to make huge plays like that, that you look at it, it's like, oh, man, it's going to go in the stat book as Gunnar Stockton touchdown pass to Zachariah Branch.
Yes.
Like, Gunnar Stockton got the ball out on time. That's all Gunnar did. Zachariah Branch obviously caught it and ran it in. He looks like the hero, but without that block from Oscar Delp, that does not happen. And certainly that's going to be a day on Rocky Top that Tennessee fans would have been celebrating instead of Georgia fans being able to get away with that victory. Now, you talked about you think eventually he's going to be a top 5 receiver in this league. That may be soon. Looking at him coming in as a rookie in the fall, where do you see him playing? What kind of role do you think he's going to play early on in his career?
I think early on he has the ability to be maybe that offset H-back in a system that's going to go ahead and get some goal line looks. If they're worried about size and speed and recovering from that getting into the NFL, I do think inline blocking is very, very, very key for the NFL. And you're going up against some absolute giants over there. And so to acclimate him, since that is not his bread and butter game, he can get there. I have full confidence he can get there. He may be split out a little bit. He may be, if there's a wide receiver on the Panthers or a play system that goes ahead and gets the ball out quick to a trio, bunch formation off to the side, and he's an inside guy, he's that slot guy blocking on that or doing a little stem block, he can do that from day one. Get him in, get him going, have him kind of abuse some DBs on that side. I think he can do that very, very well. He's going to have to learn and lean in to inline blocking, but pass catching and getting out in routes, not a problem. The speed size combo, he's NFL ready today for that, but he probably won't be first down. Maybe he's not in as much. It's going to be a second and third down situation for him until he gets later on in his career, second and third year, where I think he'll grow into it.
Yeah, and final question here for you when looking at Oscar Delp. What's the biggest thing that you think is going to determine his ceiling at the next level?
His ceiling is going to be, can he keep the athleticism long term? Because he is, again, just go look at the scores from the pro day. He's one of the top metrically measured tight ends to come out of college in recent years. Can he keep it? He's got the height, he's got the weight, he has everything there. Can it stay? And you and I both know with hairline fractures and things like that in legs, it lingers. It just does. And it's so bizarre. So if athleticism stays, he's going to continue to consistently get better each and every year, which I have all confidence he's going to be one of the top 5 in 2 or 3 years because of how hard he works and the growth that I saw out of him in Georgia. He came in with studs all around him, and he was on the field each and every year, and he got to show out for doing so. And so can that athleticism stay over the longevity of his career?
Clint, I think people are going to look at the stats that he had back in college and see that he never had over 300 yards receiving in a single season and think you're crazy for what you've said today. But I want to tell people as well that, look, I mean, Georgia is a football program. I know Tom Brady said recently, we don't have a lot of programs anymore in college because all these guys are transferring all the time. That's a separate conversation, but it does, I think, impact their development. Where a guy like Delp, he had to wait behind Brock Bowers, had to wait behind Darnell Washington. He had to share time with guys like Lawson Luck, who I think is going to be a stud this upcoming season and will be a talk of the draft next year as well at the tight end position. I'm really excited to see what this guy is able to do at the next level and to see if he comes to Carolina. But I appreciate your time, as always, coming on the show. Again, guys, Clint Shamblin, one of the hosts of Locked On Bulldogs, covering Georgia. Follow him at Dogs Podcast. They do a great job and should be another fun season for the Dogs coming up this fall. Clint, appreciate your time as always, my friend.
Absolutely.
Wow, great stuff there from Clint Shamblin and from Stephen Willis and from Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On Georgia. Well, actually, Locked On Bulldogs, cover the Georgia Bulldogs, Locked On Ole Miss, and Locked On Ducks. Kenyon Sadiq, Dae'Quan Wright, Oscar Delp, all three of those guys connected to the Panthers. Dae'Quan and Oscar are going to have 30 visits, and I'm sure at some point in time, the Carolina Panthers have already met or will meet with Kenyon Sadiq, who, man, God, can you imagine that dude at 19th overall? That would be a tremendous pick by Carolina. And then later on in the draft, Dae'Quan or Oscar could make some sense for the Panthers, who I think sorely need an influx of talent, need to get a dude in that room. And maybe Dae'Quan's not that on paper. Certainly Oscar Delp is not that on paper, but there's some things about him that Clint broke down for us that has me really interested. But Kenyon Sadiq could be that guy. So we'll see how it plays out as we continue our coverage here of the 2026 NFL Draft. Only a few short weeks away. That's going to wrap up this edition of Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and over on Blue Sky at Julian Council, where I'm back with y'all on Friday answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. In the meantime, be safe. Be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And tomorrow on the big show, we have Trevor Sikkema from from Pro Football Focus coming on to talk with us, but also later on here on Tuesday, going to react to what Dave Canales had to say at the NFL owners meetings on Monday morning there in Arizona. Some interesting comments on a 19th overall pick, Jonathan Brooks update, and is there a competition at center? All that more coming up later on here on Tuesday on Locked On Panthers.